A heartwarming story. The heart of a mother. It was raining heavily. Heavy raindrops fell from the angry sky, hitting the bumpy road and the dark forest on both sides. The sky went dark, and there were only thin flashes of lightning for a moment before they disappeared, leaving a thick, cold night. Steve's old motorcycle stopped in the middle of a muddy road, surrounded by wild mountains. There were no signals, streetlights, or people in sight. He was lost. Steve, a student in his final year of social work, had just taken part in a charity trip to a remote area. He brought books, warm clothes, and warm smiles to the children in the highlands. But on his way back, the map was wrong. It started raining, and now he was stuck in the middle of nowhere, with no idea how to get back. The cold seeped through his wet clothes. Steve looked around. The rain was so strong that he could hardly see, and he couldn't tell where the road ended and the forest began. Just as he was about to turn back, a faint yellow light appeared in the rain, like a small lighthouse in the dark sea. Steve rode his bike closer without stopping. It was a small wooden house with a tin roof, standing alone on the side of the dirt road. The house was old, but the warm light inside seemed like an invitation in the stormy night. Steve stopped and knocked on the door. A moment later, the door opened. A middle-aged woman with a face full of wrinkles from the years she has lived stepped out. She was wearing a dark brown dress and a scarf wrapped around her head. She looked at Steve with surprise and caution. "Excuse me, I'm lost. My car broke down, and it's raining heavily. Can I stay here for the night?" The woman didn't say anything for a moment, then nodded slightly and stepped back, as if she was inviting Steve to come in. The house was simple but tidy. There was an old wooden table, a few low chairs, and a small cupboard with some random bits and pieces in it. In the corner of the room, there was a wooden bed with old blankets neatly folded. On the altar near the window, some incense sticks had been burned down, and smoke still hung in the air. The woman put a cup of hot tea on the table in front of Steve. He bowed his head in thanks, his hands shaking as he accepted it. The warmth from the tea made him feel a little calmer. "Are you the only one living here?" Steve asked quietly, making sure she wasn't watching. The woman nodded, looking down. "Yes, now it's just me." The air felt heavy with her words. Steve didn't ask anything else. He looked around the room. His eyes stopped at a photo on top of a wooden cabinet near the altar. The photo showed a young man in a uniform smiling broadly, with eyes that shone like stars. Steve felt upset. "The person in the photo is..." The woman looked up at Steve, her eyes suddenly distant. "He was my son. He's gone." Steve didn't say anything. He didn't know what to say, and he was too scared to ask any more questions. Outside, it was raining lightly, and a cold wind blew through the crack in the door, carrying the faint smell of incense. After a while, the woman spoke again, as if she was telling the story to herself. "His name was Warren. He was a good student and very obedient. Like you, he enjoyed doing charity work and helping people. After finishing high school, he joined the army. He told me, 'I want to protect the weak.' I was very worried, but he smiled and said, 'Don't worry, Mum, I'll come back.'" Her voice felt tight in her throat. "But he didn't come back. 3 years ago, he died while trying to rescue people from a flood. They brought his body back, and that photo is the one I use to light incense every night and talk to him." Steve held the teacup firmly. He felt something catch in his throat. That photo. Now he realized he had seen it before. "I found an old newspaper article about soldiers who died saving people from floodwaters. The smile in that photo had once inspired him, and had been the reason why he chose to study social work." He looked at the photo again. The eyes of the man in the photo seemed to be looking straight at him. They did not seem to blame or resent him. They seemed calm and warm. "Can you tell me more about Warren?" The woman looked at Steve for a long time, then nodded. Her voice was low but warm, like embers on a cold, rainy night. He loved to play the guitar. Every afternoon, he would sit and play old songs. When he left his guitar in the attic. When I miss him, I go up there and open the guitar, even though I don't know how to play. Steve bit his lip. He felt sorry for her and respected her. He no longer felt like a lost soul in the rain. He had found a place to listen, a story to remember, and a person to look up to. That night, Steve was given a small bed next to the very hot stove. Outside, it was still raining, but inside him, the storm had calmed down. He lay there, looking up at the old wooden ceiling, feeling as if something had changed forever. The next morning, the rain had stopped. The sun shone through the grey clouds and onto the wet ground. Steve woke up to hear roosters crowing and the smell of smoke coming from the kitchen. He got up, put on his shirt, and went outside. The small house was no longer as gloomy as it had been the night before. The first rays of sunlight shone on the tin roof, reflecting off the water droplets on the leaves, sparkling like tiny crystals. Everything felt strangely peaceful. She was cooking breakfast, being careful and precise. Steve crept closer. Yes, the porridge smells so good. Oh, you're up. Come here and eat so you can stay warm. Then you can be on your way. Steve sat down on a small wooden chair and took the bowl of porridge. He ate slowly, still thinking about last night. The photo on the altar, her eyes and the silence of the rainy night all seemed to stay in his heart. Thank you for letting me stay. And for breakfast too. It's nothing. It's rare to have visitors these days. Imagine that my child has a friend over. She smiled. Her smile showed how lonely she felt. But it felt nice. Steve got up, put the dishes away, and was about to leave. Before leaving, he turned back to look one last time at the small house. The photo frame and the old mother standing at the door, her eyes following him. Auntie, can I ask you something? Can I come back to visit you and Warren? The woman stopped for a moment, then nodded, her eyes filling with tears. Yes, I'll be here whenever you want, waiting for you. When he returned to the city, Steve was no longer the young man he had been before. Deep down, he felt a new kind of strength, quiet but strong. He started to rewrite the story of that rainy night. Not to mention getting lost, but to talk about the old lady in the wild, the young soldier who fell for the people, and the simple but important things about motherly love, being a patriot and life, being ready to sacrifice yourself for others. The story about Steve spread quickly among the other students. He was invited to speak at youth forums about what makes a good life. But unlike the long, fancy speeches of others, Steve's stories were short, emotional and honest. He went back to that little house every holiday. Sometimes he brought a few friends with him, and sometimes he went alone with just his backpack, his guitar, and a bunch of white chrysanthemums. One time, he brought a group of high school students who were taking part in a life skills program. When they arrived, she was waiting in the front yard with a pot of tea. We've come to visit you. Steve smiled and waved. That's great. It's so lively here today. The children gathered around her, listening to stories about Warren. Warren was once like them, riding his bike to school in the rain, loving cats, and writing poems to his mother. She spoke gently, no longer in pain, and shared a precious memory with the young people. Steve stood watching from a distance. The photo stayed where it was, but it no longer upset him as much as it did when he first saw it. To him, it was a symbol of strength and endless love. A year after they met, Steve started a small group of volunteers called Little Lights to support families who had lost loved ones while serving, especially in remote areas. The small house by the dirt road was the first stop on the group's journey. They fixed the roof, repainted the gate, planted some flower beds around the yard, and created a small corner to remember Warren's story with words written by Steve himself. Some people live on, in the hearts of others, not because they didn't die, but because they lived so beautifully. Steve sometimes sat in front of the altar and talked to the brother he had never met. He played simple tunes on an old guitar he had taught himself to play. His grandmother once said, "That guitar still feels warm to the touch." Now, Steve adds his own warmth to it, the warmth of a new generation, of gratitude, and of faith in the path he has chosen. One summer's day, it started raining again. It wasn't raining heavily, but it was raining constantly. Steve stood in front of the small house. This time he wasn't wet or tired, but he felt peaceful. She died one autumn afternoon while sitting on the porch knitting sweaters for the orphans Steve had brought there. She died peacefully, not quietly, because she had another son, not by blood, to continue the story of his life that was left unfinished. Steve held a bunch of white chrysanthemums and put them in front of the photo. The young soldier's eyes in the picture were as bright as ever. "I came to visit you and my brother. The children are all in the city today. Little Lights has opened its first classroom in the village. We even got a new guitar. I think he would have liked it." Outside, the rain continued to fall softly, but there was no longer any loneliness or sadness. Each raindrop seemed to say hello, tell a story or make a promise. Steve smiled, got up quietly, and carried on, through life, among people, in the rain and the sunshine.